Good afternoon and welcome to this Fleet News webinar on safety and compliance in partnership with Arval UK. Now, safety is consistently at the top of any company agenda, but there are many elements to a robust policy and nobody gets it right every time. Many fleets are striving for zero harm. So what are the initiatives that can have the biggest impact and how do you go about integrating them into your business? Today's webinar will seek to answer some of those questions and with the help of my expert panel of experts who will be providing their thoughts on safety and compliance. So we have Matt Hammond, Head of Fleet at Altrad, Aaron Powell, Fleet Director at Speedy Asset Services, Matt Neal, Group Fleet Manager at Platform Housing, Mark Woodworth, Transportation Director at Univar Solutions, and from our sponsor Arval UK, we have Ian Pearson, Head of Leased Insurance. So this is intended to be an interactive webinar, so please get involved either by asking your own questions or by offering your views via the comment box in your dashboard. Finally, the opinions expressed by our panelists during this webinar are their personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect their company policy. So let's start by looking at culture and buy-in first to safety. So first question I have is, how do you instill safety as part of the company culture? How do you get that buy-in and engagement at board level, at manager level, and at driver level? So Matt Hammond, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, Steve, is to make it relevant. Make it relevant to your business. There's lots of companies out there. There's lots of specialist businesses that can support on this, but unless it's relevant to how you operate and fits within your operating rhythm, then you're always going to struggle to introduce any element of road risk or safety process. I think make it relevant, and the most important thing is make it consistent as well. You have to start at the top. You have to get the director buy-in. You have to make it something that they understand, they accept, they see the benefits from, whether it's a financial viewpoint you go down, whether it's purely safety, whether it's whatever element it is, make it fit with them and make them drive it down. You're always going to struggle to get a driver to instill safety if they see the directors not doing it. So it's got to come from them, and it's got to be at every level down. And I think as you filter down for a business, it gets more strength. If you can see your line managers engaging and doing what you're asking, and their line manager, it gives it a lot more power when it gets down to the driver at the bottom. And I think the other thing is, whatever you do, keep the message simple. Don't overcomplicate what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes when you look at safety, you look at 10 or 15 areas you want to tackle. Strip it back to one or two. Focus on them. Make it a really simple, concise message that the business can understand. If you can get it something that's a simple strap line or something straightforward like that, the better. But keep it simple, and you're much more likely to get the results from that message driving forward.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, Speedy has an excellent record on safety with a comprehensive safety policy. How do you go about instilling that as part of the company culture?
It's very similar to Matt, really, to be fair. You've got to start at the top and work down. You've got to show the benefit. I mean, safety is part of our culture anyway. It's part of our core values. So what you've got to do is show the benefits. You know, everyone has a right to go home of a night. You know, you don't want anyone being injured or seriously injured. The benefits are not always financial. It may cost money, but it outweighs somebody not being injured, outweighs that financial benefit, that financial cost, sorry. So it's all about the benefits, and you've got to show that from the top down. But also, probably the hardest people to get the buy-in are the people who are actually using the vehicles in the first place. Like, why are you putting this in? Why are you putting cameras in? Why are you doing this? So you have to show that benefit to them, of which we do anyway. So we'll show an accident where they've been blamed for it, and we can prove that it wasn't them, for instance. And that does it, really. You get that buy-in straight away then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Matt, Neal, moving on to you. What sort of processes have you been through with Platform? Matt, you're just on mute at the moment.
Schoolboy error.
Well, you have just come back from Washington.
Similar to the other guys, really, in the fact that you need to get buy-in from the correct stakeholders in our business. One of the things I always install in my business is that our drivers, or our operatives, as we call them, need to remember that they're drivers of vehicles before they're tradesmen or in the role, whatever they're undertaking, because we need to get them safely to wherever it is that they're going. And also understanding from a business, like from the board, showing them what our pinch points are and what is actually like a key issue within our organisation, and showing them that and showing them what the impact is by installing different safety measures in the business, I find has supported us getting things pushed through.
Hmm. And Mark, with yourself, you're obviously more at the heavier end of the market with vans, but with trucks as well. Does that change the way that the safety culture is embedded within the company?
Yeah, I think for us, following on from exactly what Aaron and Matt Hammond have said, that you've got to start at the top. And globally, we have a culture of, we are serious about safety. So our message, serious about safety, appears on a number of things, whether it be the vehicle itself, whether it be the driver's uniform. We constantly push the serious about safety message. One of the key things, I mean, just we cover a number of things that have already been mentioned, but I think one of the key things that I've found to be a big benefit is responding to safety concerns quickly, but also responding to them in a way the person understands. So if somebody comes forward with a genuine safety concern, we've got to respond to every single one. Even if we've responded to it 10 times before, we've still got to respond to that person. That person needs to understand that when they raise something, it gets dealt with, or at least they get a response as to why you can't deal with it, because it may not be a genuine safety concern, or there may be something that they need to do themselves to remove the fear of a safety concern. So I think just, I could repeat everything that's been said so far for Univar, but we've got a culture of serious about safety from the top. We put the message everywhere. It's on the driver's uniforms now, so on the right sleeve of the driver, so facing the window, it's on the uniforms. Across our European fleet, we've got fleet across Europe, it's on the other side of the sleeve for exactly the same reason, that the person walking up to the cab can read the message, serious about safety, in the local language. But also responding to them safety concerns, regardless of how big or small they are, you've got to respond to the person that raises them.
Mm-hmm. Ian, obviously with Arval, huge number of customers that you're dealing with. What sort of advice would you give them when it comes to trying to embed that sort of safety culture within their businesses?
I think firstly, it's quite comforting that we're pretty much all on the same narrative. It definitely does start from the top. Although I have to say that the ownership is transversal across the business, so you have to have the buy-in. I think Matt said at the start about getting the buy-in, and absolutely, it's the responsibility and accountability of everybody, and it's getting that message across. I think purely from a driver safety perspective for Arval, I'm actually quite fortunate in the sense of answering this question, because one of the big strategy pillars under Arval Beyond strategy is very much around driver safety, and with a strive and an appetite to do whatever we can to reduce incident frequency for customers by 10% by 2025. So there's a natural kind of push and progression for us to endorse that, and also a responsibility to kind of make sure that we're living and breathing it within our own fleet and our own employees too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just a reminder to people that are still joining us, coming in through the chat. We'd like this to be interactive, so please do throw any questions into the mix as we go through the course of this webinar. But moving on a little, so okay, we've looked at the culture. How would you build a business case for a new safety initiative? Very often we've had feedback whenever we've done roundtables or discussions with fleets that may have struggled to get something over the line when it involves upfront cost. Trying to get that sort of that sort of financial or the return on investment case across. So how would you build the business case, particularly for something that requires upfront investment? Aaron, can I come to you first?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I tend to leave the cost to the end and building everything around why we're going to do it. So for instance, we've now ordered our vehicles with auto stop reverse. There's obviously a cost to that, but most of our accidents, I'd say massive proportion of our accidents are all reversing accidents. So if you can take away the £500,000 we've spent in repairs and third-party costs from that, and add £10 a month to your lease over the period of time, it far outweighs it. So you just got to build it of what's it going to save, what's the benefit of it, and by the way, it's going to cost a little bit here at the upfront. So I tend to do it that way. I tend to do it in reverse.
Okay. Matt Hammond?
Yeah, absolutely. What Aaron says, cost versus benefits all day long. You've got to sell both sides. Yes, we're looking for financial investment from the business, but what's the benefits? What's the outcome? Outcome versus pound spent is basically what it's all about. And I think with anything like this, you've got to set your stall out. You've got to tell them what you hope to gain, what your time scale is, what your stage gates are. And I think I've found with time, you've got to report back when you say you can report back, positive and negative. We've done a rollout in the past where we didn't hit the numbers on time, and you've got to give that information back. Things come out the woodwork that don't always go to plan. But I think if you're clear with all those stages at the start and what your expected return against your cost is, then it makes it not just easier to sell to the board, but also easier to monitor where you're up to, give you progress back, give you positives and negatives at the end of the progress, and sets you in good stead for the next one. So, yeah.
Okay. Matt, Neil, what do you do to sort of build the business case when you're taking something internally within the business?
Again, similar to these guys, benefit versus impact, and then the financial outlay. I sit under finance, so naturally I have to show all the benefits of the financial outlay. But we've got an investment appraisal panel, and I'll go to them with the initiative, and on that panel it goes to all of the senior leadership team within the business, which in-houses various different stakeholders. So I get input from lots of areas of the business to make sure that the investment and the initiative is actually pushed through and shared across the whole business, as opposed to just coming from one angle. So we've got a real diverse and proactive tool that we use for that, and then it carries on and goes through the board and eventually goes to the exec level.
Mark, coming to you. Any sort of things you've had to sort of overcome when building business cases for safety initiatives?
Yeah, I think what's the cost of not doing it, or the potential cost of not doing it, whatever that may be. I think if we can report to our senior leadership team that if X happens, this is going to be the cost, we can remove that risk by spending Y, then to be honest, the business case kind of talks for itself. Again, going back onto my earlier point about responding to concerns raised by our driver team, if our driver or anybody in the business, driver team, anybody in the business raises a safety concern, if we can then follow that through and say, well, we're now working on it with a board paper or whatever it may be to go and get the funding to complete something that's going to stop or remove the risk for you as a person, we actually then get buy-in from the team, which helps us push it through, push it through at a different level. So then getting the buy-in from the team at the bottom, pushing it through at the top level, but also highlighting to our finance team or whoever it may be, what's the risk of not doing it, helps us push certain things through and get certain things through. And then I think we've got to go back and say, look, by doing this, we have saved Y, or this could have happened. I think, and going back to Aaron's point there around the good and the bad, that we've got to say, look, we've saved X because we proved this, and keep that communication level up. So then when your next initiative goes forward, there's a bit of a trust and a belief that the last one wasn't a waste of money, and actually the last one saved somebody from being injured, or saved a life, or saved some financial benefit in there. If you can evidence that in your next proposal, already you've got that trust and confidence from the senior team that you're not talking rubbish, and actually, your safety initiatives are actually beneficial to the business.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, Ian. Again, with the conversations you're having with clients, what are some of the things you can help with to get initiatives across the line?
I think I'm going to just pick up on Mark's point there. Absolutely fundamental is apart from the cost savings, that cost of non-compliance is sometimes goes under the radar potentially a little bit, and I feel like it's around telling the story and creating the narrative. And if you take driver safety specifically back to its roots, there's some stark and scary and actually horrific statistics that you could start to talk through to try and get the point across around how and what and why we should be doing something. And when you consider that over 1,600 people were killed on the UK roads in the UK in the last 12 months, and somewhere around 27,000 were either seriously injured or killed on the roads. Those are huge numbers, and we have a responsibility and an accountability to not be part of that statistic. wherever possible. So a lot of maybe what we might cover today drives, excuse the pun, a little bit of that, but it is just making sure that everybody is aware of the potential of saving a life. Mark again makes a great point. Saving lives is critical and important, clearly, and it's beyond the financial side of things a little bit for me. So I guess from a risk perspective, it's just making sure that we're giving, when we're talking to boards or to an executive committee, it's making sure that they've got an informed decision to make across all of the parameters.
Mark?
Yeah, I think Ian, you're absolutely right. I think one thing I forgot to mention is probably more in Ian's arena than anybody else's, is if there's any sort of insurance bursary or financial benefit from the insurer, and getting the buy-in from the insurer actually helps as well. I know we've been through quite a risk change in partnership with our AHS team that covers every person who drives a vehicle on behalf of work. So a vehicle of any size, but obviously focused from my world really around our truck fleet, that this team of drivers are out there every day carrying dangerous goods. So when something goes wrong, it tends to go wrong very quickly and have very big problems. We're not carrying cornflakes and water. We're carrying acids and flammables that, as I say, when it goes wrong very quickly. We've managed to bring in certain initiatives with our insurer. So they've part funded, or they've sat in the background and not funded, but helped us roll out something, or provide some consultancy support for a couple of days to help us do something, especially around certain loads that we can't move during the day. We've ended up, if you get the buy-in from the insurer, it also gives you your initiative a bit of gravitas.
Okay, so looking at some of the specifics of your risk policies, your safety policies, what approach do you take to driver training? So thinking about how you select your drivers for training, the types of training that you offer, and how you ensure that the training achieves your objectives. Mark, can I stay with you on this one?
Yeah, of course, can. Yeah, I think for us, driver training, we need to understand what the person needs training on. So we use our telematics data in terms of driver score to look at what that driver maybe needs support on, or even how they view risk. They could be a very, very good driver, but view risk at a different level to the rest of the team. So actually, what they see as okay, other parts of the team or other people in the team might see as a high risk thing to do. Excuse me. I think we also rely again on our drivers to tell us what they want. So if they see a particular problem, particular need, as part of that safety reporting process, we would ask them to, how do you think we could help you get over this? That may then be additional training, additional support, additional coaching. But again, we're quite reliant on our people and asking our people to help us help them, which I think is something that we've seen some quite good inroads in. I think in terms of driver training, making it specific, so everybody can sit on a tachograph course that's relevant to everybody, but actually making that tachograph course or that road risk course relevant to the person doing the job, again, gets that buy-in from the person, which makes them believe or feel and trust the fact that you're doing this to help them and support them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Matt, Neil, how do you approach your driver training in terms of the types of training that you offer?
So we're just rolling out a new driver, it's called a Chief Driver Training Program across our organisation. To start with, we've got a really comprehensive learning development team that support us with any sort of training that we want to put our drivers on. With the roles that our operatives do, it's hard to take them off the road. So a lot of ours is e-learning. We've opted for e-learning training. If there is a need, we do have the facility to be able to put drivers onto in-vehicle drivers, so to do some on-the-road driver training if need be. But we try and offer e-learning predominantly. And part of the driver training program that we're rolling out now, it encompasses everything like Mark said about the telematics data and all the fines and accident data that we get in. It all pulls everything into one place, gives that driver a score, and then it helps us understand what our risk is of each of our drivers or operatives. And then we can rank them into different areas, so we can start looking at different, if there's a certain area of the country that's causing a problem, and we can start delving into that area, etc. So we currently rolling that out now at the moment. So we've recently taken it on off the back of another housing association having a real success with it, which had a positive success, and it has been endorsed by the insurer as well. So fingers crossed, it's going to hopefully looking out for a positive outcome on that.
Okay, Aaron, moving on to you with the Speedy Fleet. I know you have quite a comprehensive suite of training packages available for your drivers.
Yeah, we do. So we have a set of mandatory training that all drivers and colleagues who can drive will undergo. That they are set in stone when you join the business. You get your job title. It produces those mandatory training courses, but we also, because we're Force Gold, we also have to do all of the Force Gold mandatory training, both classroom and e-learning. We also use our telematics for driver profiling. That gives us then a score of what that driver's good at, what he's not good at. And then we tailor the training to that individual based on that as well. So that could be, buddying up, could be one-to-one training. It could be, it could be anything really based on their driver profile.
Yeah. Okay. Matt Hammond, I saw you've posted something in the chat. Still a lack of questions or opinions.
Well, yeah, very quiet today, aren't they? Must all be asleep with it being an afternoon session, Steve. That's what it must be.
So what do you do in terms of driver training on your fleet?
So for us, how do we select drivers? We select all drivers. We don't discriminate on that. We like to pick on everybody the same. And we've kind of, a bit like Aaron, we have quite a suite of things that we can use. But we've kind of changed now. We're going down the route of looking at the telematics data, looking at what people's individual needs were and trying to tailor for that. But we've now changed our tact, and we're looking more at trends across the business. We've now got a process in place where we ask the question, why do things go right, as opposed to why do things go wrong? And we're trying to look at, most of the journeys, 90% of the journeys, we don't have an incident and everything goes right. So why does it work then and not work on the other ones? So the theory being that instead of trying to make bad good, we're now trying to make good better. So we're looking at the wider trends, and we'll use it as a themed approach. So it might be a case of hazard perception that's the biggest issue that we're seeing at a session. We'll tailor our training through e-learning, through driver training, through VR training, through classroom courses, and we'll depend on what the sort of trends and seasons are moving at the time. So yeah, not so much specific now, more of a trend focus, and it seems to be paying dividends for us.
Okay, and before I come to Ian, just both Aaron and Matt, because I know you both have quite a comprehensive suite of training packages. A question's come in about the shift to EV vehicles. So do you both see a need for tailored training on the differences of driving EV vehicles in terms of range anxiety, speeding and braking?
There is a specific course that you have to do for EV vehicles anyway, because they're over the threshold. So the 4.2 ton. So you have to do an additional 5 hours anyway. But yeah, we are starting to tailor our courses around EVs. We've got a lot of EVs coming into the business very quickly. And yeah, our training is around about range anxiety, how to get the best out of it. All of the stuff you need to do. Don't try and jumpstart it if it breaks. All of those things, it'll be tailored around all of that.
Yeah, and I think even on the smaller ones, the smaller vans where you're not breaking the 3.5 ton threshold, people do need training. It's a different animal. You're suddenly getting in a small van that's got the power of an M3, and people need to understand that, need to understand the implications of how to drive EVs, and it is a different driving style, and it's all well and good for probably most of us on here for demos coming out of our ears, but a lot of the people, it's the first time they're going to get in an EV is when you turn up with a van. So yeah, it is something that needs addressing, needs to be made sure, make sure people are confident and give them that safe space and that availability to say they're not. I think everybody is too proud to say they don't know how to do something. So you have to make it available that, they've got that cushion in there, so they can have a bit more training. They can have a bit more of an introductory time if they need to, without sort of finger pointing and being called names.
Mm-hmm. And Ian, if I come to you, we talk about driver training. I'm quite interested. There was a press release from Arval that came out this week about educating drivers on the new safety technology now being fitted as standard on many cars. We've just talked about, specific training for electric vehicles. So, you talk a little bit about how important you see that education piece just on new safety technology in general.
I'm glad that Matt and Aaron have kind of led me into this subject because it's one that I have a huge vested interest with our insured leased product. So we've got over 5,000 EVs insured on that product. So the subject of EV and training and awareness is very, very close to my day-to-day concerns. And it's not to demonize the EV transition. It's more around making sure that we all respect the fact that I think it was Matt that made the point around we're literally giving the keys to people potentially, and they do not have the understanding or knowledge or experience of what they're actually taking care of. And there are some really simple, basic things that I drive an EV as a company vehicle, and it's remembering things like they are quiet, and when you're in a pedestrianised area, people can't hear them. And it seems simple and simplistic, but actually it's very real. It doesn't take much for somebody to step off the edge of a pavement that's not quite aware of their surroundings, and it's trying to make sure that we educate drivers that can happen, and that the anticipation of those kind of things. So I guess I've got, like I said, this vested interest in the insured book, but also we've got our own Arval fleet responsibility. So it's again living and breathing that. We do an annual assessment, a risk assessment for everybody, on whether it's grey fleet or not. I think taking note of and reacting to telematics data. One thing that we're piloting currently on the Arval insured lease product is very much along point that McNeil was making, and it's making a connected insured lease product where we're pulling in the data from accidents, we're pulling in the data from the telematics driver behaviour, and we're also pulling into the mix fines, whether that be parking or intended prosecutions, to build this profile of driver behaviour. And the intention is that you'll never get the exact story from any output of score. There's always context behind to look at, and it's making sure that we don't kind of miss the red flags. And some of the red flags aren't obvious. If it's okay, I'll just give you an example of one that cropped up recently in a claim review with a customer, whereby we had a driver that had multiple incidents, but they were all non-fault incidents. So the assumption is, and that's okay, they're not fault. But when we look into the actual semantics of it, they're all exactly the type of same of incident. Non-fault, third parties running to the rear of the driver. My first question is the driver behaviour piece? Is the driver leaving it very late to brake and not giving people behind? So there's a bit more education, I think, that we can actually start to push out there if we're not doing already, around the not so obvious. And I guess making sure that the theme that probably has been done to death already is consistency, and that consistent approach. I think it was Matt Hammond that mentioned about it's everybody's responsibility, and it's making sure that we look at everybody and that there's no outliers.
Just picking up on the insurance side of things. So Colin Hutz asked around whether anyone has any data or proof that driver training has had a positive impact on insurance claims, and how significant has that impact been? Matt Hammond, I know you started to answer that in the chat.
I think the proof's in the pudding. We've all committed to safety, across our fleets, and we've all seen the improvements through it. Now, that's not fluke. One of us might get lucky and get an improvement, but the fact we're all invested in driver training, risk profiling, risk management, and we've seen our claims ratio or accident stats tumble says it works. It's like anything. If you train people, they will be better at what they do. If you fail to train them, then you're down for the luck of the draw. You've got to invest in people, and they repay that through being better educated to be better drivers and a safer fleet. So yeah, absolutely. I think there might not be a piece of paper to say, look, I've done this and I've achieved this, but any telematics data you've got in over a period will show you that. Any incident reporting stats will show you that. Anything that you commit to properly, and that doesn't mean saying putting telematics in and going, it's not done anything. We all know there's too many fleets that do that, but put it in, invest in the time, invest in the resource, invest in the people, invest in the expectation, you will get the results from it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can anyone else point to savings or improvements in their insurance premiums that they've achieved as a result of some of the safety initiatives they've introduced?
Yeah, our premiums actually went down this year because of what we've done, which is the first time our premiums have ever gone down, to be fair. Like I say, most of our accidents are small manoeuvring accidents, so which is what we're working on now. But we've done all the other safety initiatives we put in, have reduced our accident claims and reduced our premiums, and the premium has come down this year, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
What we've found is that in the first year of me doing this, our actual ratio, accident ratio went up, because the issue was they weren't being logged. So when I started, I made sure that everything was being logged, so we kind of understood the picture, like near misses and everything basically, so I could get an understanding and a picture as to where I needed to target first, because without that, it's almost like in the wind, isn't it, really?
And that's a valid point. I think absolutely, there's a lot of hidden stuff in fleet. People will not report an off-hire vehicles with damage because they don't want to be on a list. But you're right, you've got to get to a point where you've got total visibility of everything. And I think Aaron mentioned it before. You got to work with people. It might be Mark. You work with your insurers. You've got to work as a collective. This isn't a solo process. We work now with our accident management company, our insurers, our group transport managers. We have a collective, and we look at where we need to improve, how we can improve. We get input from our external sources like our insurers. They see more fleets than we do, so that they can bring things to the party as well. And yeah, like Aaron, we've seen a reduction in our insurance because we've put these steps in places, we've put these targets in place, and we've also seen the benefits.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've found as well is I found out what our situation is, so I know what the worst case scenario is, and I can only build on that and improve it. But I found I reached out to some of the other housing associations and found out how the people that are having real successes, and found out how they're supporting as well. So I think collaboration is key with somebody that's working in the same industry as you. So you can start sharing some knowledge and improvements and initiatives. You might be able to collaborate together and work on a project together to help support an improvement as well.
Yeah. Okay. Following on from that, I was going to ask around other forms of driver education and communication that you use. But I'm going to throw into that mix as well a question that Richard Bradley's asked around pre-recruitment testing. And do you use it to ensure that you have safe drivers initially? Matt, Neil, you were top of my list. If you can answer that one, great. Or talk about other forms of driver education that you use.
So other forms of driver education that we use are toolbox talk. So like I mentioned earlier, it's really difficult to take our operatives off the road for like long periods of time. But once a month they all get together and get into a forum where they can all talk about various issues. And fleet is one of their, it's always brought up every month. And we've always got something to talk to them about. So we share quite a bit of knowledge via that forum because it's easier than sending out an email. We do back up a lot of the information with emails, and we do send information via their mobile apps as well. But the majority, I think the easiest way to get stuff over to our operatives is by talking to them face to face. I don't think there's nothing better than talking to somebody as opposed to sending them emails. And in regards to pre-recruitment stuff, we do offer we don't offer training as such. We do the usual checks to start with. So first and foremost, make sure they've got a valid license. So we use a digital driving license check-in service to make sure that they've got the valid license first of all. And then when they come on, they then follow, once they've started the business, they then get issued a load of mandatory training they have to complete before they jump in the vehicle. And equally, as part of that process, is they have to do a weekly vehicle van check. So when they first take the keys, they do a van check to make sure the vehicle's safe before they drive away in it.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, what else what other forms of education do you have on your fleet?
So we do a lot of toolbox talks on fleet. We produce transport bulletins on a regular basis on any updates, whether that be safety or any other transport related incident. But we do it. We've run in a driver of the month/year scheme for the last 12 months now, and those drivers who win that, so we have 8 regions, and those drivers are the ones that then buddy up with other drivers who aren't doing so well, or new drivers coming into the business, to show them how to get to that. And it creates healthy competition, to be fair, because there's significant prizes at the end of it. So we've had drivers who've been way down the list who've come, up to the top and won before now. But going back on the other questions, I just had one thing. So when I joined the business about 2.5 years ago, we had drivers on 6, 7, 8 accidents at a time. The last insurance review we did last month was we had 3 drivers on 2 incidents. So it shows that things are working.
Absolutely. Mark, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think again, I could probably repeat most of what's been said already, but I think in terms of driver coaching, listen, Aaron's already mentioned it. I think I can go into a bit more detail. We put a team of lead drivers in, so we've got a lead driver now at each site, and that driver does do that driver training. They're competent and skilled to do any task on site, so they can drive any vehicle, complete any activity. And we don't just train on the vehicle itself; we train on the delivery element of the job as well. So we try and encompass a day out with a lead driver, not just on driving, but on the whole piece of how you go and deliver and how you conduct yourself throughout the day. In terms of communication, we do like others a monthly stand down. So it's last week of the month, which is typically our quietest week in terms of outbound deliveries. We have an hour of a morning with every site, and effectively they have quite a lengthy scripted agenda to get through. So that agenda would include a number of business updates, but also around what their impact has had. So if there have been a spike in claims, then we would discuss that, look, let's be careful because this has happened or that's happened. We also share across every site, every incident that's happened that month. So we sometimes include the financial element if we can, but if we can't, we'd say, look, driver in this particular site had this incident, make sure you don't do the same, or we've had a spike in reversing incidents, so this is what we're doing to stop it. And again, we ask for feedback at the end of that session. So then what tends to happen is we do our monthly review with the drivers. We then get a number of safety reports or concerns or questions back. We then go through our normal health and safety process and act on those. So I think, look, communication's got to be two-way. As everybody else has mentioned so far, communication is key. You've got to make sure you do it right. And one thing we did is we tried to go a bit too techy for some of our team members. So some of our team members prefer a piece of paper on a notice board. So we now cover it off in a number of ways. We've got a technical solution. We've also got the old school piece of paper on a notice board to make sure communication does reach everybody. And no one's got the fear of putting the hand up and saying, I didn't get that message because I'm not technically advanced enough to use a phone app or whatever. So we had to make communication right for the person, right for the business, i.e. once a month, direct communication that's relatively scripted so everybody gets the same message, and then use our lead drivers to not only help us deliver that message on the ground after the session, but then to go out and coach and develop drivers throughout the following month.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Matt Hammond, in terms of other initiatives that you're looking at, and also I suppose that pre-recruitment testing question as well.
Yeah, so I think on the recruitment point first, for our HGV drivers, we make them do an assessment before they get approved. So we'll do the interview stage. We'll then ask them back, and we'll take them out in the truck, and we'll get one of our trainers to take them out for an hour and a half, do various manoeuvres, various courses, just make sure they're up to standard, and they won't get the contract until they've passed that point. As far as our cars and vans, pretty much like Matt Neal says, we do the license checking, we do the usual usual checks and balances on them, but we don't do any one-to-one training on those guys as such at this moment in time. As far as what we do regarding training, pretty much like everybody else said, we're very much into this self-improvement program at the moment. So this whole why things go right and get the drivers. So we've installed a new telematics system which has the in-cab light bar, which gives them that guidance themselves. We've also rolled out our own VR training, which is all around hazard perception, and we're getting all the drivers to go through this training. So we tend to try and stick on the same theme. So we'll do that. We'll do the toolbox talks on the same theme. We've got the e-learning course on the same theme. So multitude of areas. I don't think there's anything really apart from the VR that the other guys haven't already touched on. I think it's that, like Mark said, it's that communication. You've got to keep communicating. It's got to be clear communication. It's got to be concise. And ideally, it's got to be on a theme. So you keep the same trend across the business, and it sort of slowly sinks into people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mark.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to have a microphone, Stephen. I was waiting for
No
microphone
worries.
off.
No
Apologies.
problem. So I was going to ask, because there's a few questions that have come in around sort of telematics. So I was going to ask around what role does data and driver monitoring play in your risk policies? I'm going to come to Ian first, but then when I come to the fleets, pulling in a couple of the questions from the chat, in particular around, are you increasingly getting sort of pressure or influence from insurers to introduce telematics, and also about the whole kind of buy into telematics and dash cams, and as they become increasingly sort of AI enabled, what kind of role that they play within your fleet. So, Ian, can I come to you first and get your view on data and driver assistance?
I think that first and foremost, having data it's fantastic. It's obviously the way that the world is innovating now with, as you say, AI. The big concern I have always is, and probably not necessarily the immediate response you might be expected, but having the data is one thing, doing something with it is key. And part of that actually is one, a responsibility, but also can be a bit of a concern, as in having the data and doing nothing. You effectively or potentially to ignore is to condone. So if you're missing something in the data that the extract that it's giving you and not doing something about it, we've got corporate risk that we shouldn't ignore. So as much as that's a huge positive from a risk perspective, driver safety piece, we need to make sure that we're actually clear that we're taking actions and output from it. The data is always a great indicator of driver behaviour, and it does make it easy to potentially spot a red flag, and then gives us the ability to do something about that. And sometimes it's not so much the obvious, but it's just that proactive piece. And I think the more that we can make use of data, the easier it is for us to manage risk. Just from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Matt Neal, what role does it play on your fleet? What's the vast suite of vehicle and driver monitoring technology do you deploy?
So we use Lightfoot on our fleet, and we went live on the 30th of January, and our first month's results have been fantastic. We've seen a massive reduction in our road risk, an improvement in our driver behaviour. It's improved our fleet like twofold. I'm skeptical about everything, so anybody that's looking to go into any sort of driver training program, I was skeptical from the start, because something that's too good to be true, I always find generally is. But I've found that so far that we've seen a lower reduction in our incidents. We've seen a reduced fuel cost, and we've seen an increase in the driver behaviour in a positive way. So yeah, like I say, it's quite new to us in our organisation, but the results have been phenomenal.
So why do you feel it's worked so well?
The way we rolled it out was a positive way. We got a lot of driver buy-in at the beginning, so I feel by engaging with them and getting them to understand why you're doing it, I think that kind of helps them, as they're the people that are driving the vehicles at the end of the day. So we found that engagement worked. We did get quite a bit of pushback from some of the more mature drivers in our fleet, but again, we had to just coach and develop them and support them, and obviously try and guide them through the change that the business needed to go to. It wasn't a case of if we were doing it, it was kind of when we were going to do it as an organisation. We needed to do something. We know we did, and it was just about getting them on board.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Aaron?
I think when you install telematics to start with, you always get a massive plus, because everyone panics and thinks I better drive better. So you always get that instant fuel reduction, better driving, all of that. You've just got to keep on top of that as well. So when it beds in and everyone knows it's there, and then they start ignoring the buzzer going off and all the rest of it, you've then got that's where the data then kicks in, I think. But it does play a major part in in a lot of things, like say we reduce our premiums because of the safety equipment. One of the biggest things we had is the driver-facing camera. Why are you putting a driver-facing camera in? So why have you got AI on me? Why have you got all of this? And then once you can prove why you're doing it, one of their biggest concerns were, are you listening to what I'm singing? Or are you listening to me on singing to the radio? Well, no, we're not. We're not watching the cameras 24/7. We're going to look at the camera if you have an incident. That's all. So it's just getting them to understand it. But yeah, like I say, when you first install telematics, you do get an instant hit.
Yeah, and there's a question in there around the sort of pushback from drivers and unions as well, particularly on driver-facing cameras. So, how did you overcome that? Was it just sort of leading them through the process?
Yeah, it was just leading through. Proving that we're not sitting there watching the cameras all day. We're not listening to what they're talking to. We're only going to look at that camera when there's an incident, when that's a G-force related incident, and if they're not doing anything wrong, we don't do anything with it. If they go over a pothole or they do some, but if they have an accident, we're there to say to people, he wasn't on the mobile phone. He did have his seatbelt on. He had both hands on the steering wheel. He was in control of the vehicle, and you pulled out. We had one yesterday where a cyclist come straight across the junction in front of our driver, and we hit them. That normally would have come in as a claim straight away, but we could see the cyclist went straight across in front of us at a junction. So,
okay. So Matt Hammond, if I come to you in terms of telematics, dash cams, AI, what you're using and the benefits that it's had.
So we've had telematics in for a number of years now, probably the last 8-9 years. I think it's an absolutely vital tool for fleet management. I don't think you can manage your fleet or manage your risk without telematics. And like Aaron says, yeah, you put it in and you suddenly see this massive spike and go, God, we're great. And then they all forget it's there and it tailors off. But it's about monitoring. It's about using the results. It's like understanding what you expect to get from it. The biggest risk with telematics is you put it in and the telematics companies will tell you it does absolutely everything and sell you the sun. And it's too easy to get distracted from what you're trying to achieve from it. So I would say with telematics, you need a clear vision of what you expect to achieve, utilize that part of the package, and then gradually expand into the other areas as and when you need to. Don't get overwhelmed by it. But as far as insurance companies are concerned, I've never really had an insurance company tell me to put it in, but I think we've had it in and we've used it the other way to drive the insurance premium down because we've got it, because we can demonstrate, well, one, it's installed, two, we're utilizing the data properly, and three, we're acting on the results. We've used that back with the insurance companies to quite good result in the past. So that's quite a positive. As far as cameras and that, we have forward-facing cameras in our HGVs, and I put those in to protect the drivers as much as anything. As everybody knows, if there's an incident involving a truck, doesn't matter what it is, it's always the truck's fault. And we have successfully used that on a few occasions. We've even had one occasion where our truck was at fault for hitting the back of a taxi, which suddenly found out there was 11 people in this taxi when the claims started coming in. So, it does benefit us. We've not gone down the route of inward facing. I'm not convinced on the need for that or the need for AI. And the reason being, not because I don't rate the technology, just because I think where we are as a fleet, where our risk profile as a fleet, I think Aaron mentioned it earlier, a lot of our incidents, like a low speed manoeuvring, bumping, we don't have, touch wood at the moment, many in-journey incidents. We're quite safe on that. So I don't see the financial benefit to putting those in at this stage. Now, that doesn't mean to say down the line we won't look at it, and we're constantly reviewing our tech and what we roll out across the fleet. But at this moment in time, I think we're pretty well covered on what we've got with the telematics, with the in-cab driver training, and with the forward-facing cameras in the HGVs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Mark, what are you using on your fleet? And I mean, there's a question that's come in as well around still getting a lot of pushback from drivers and how we can get them to better understand the policies and the technology.
Okay, I think I can answer that one of how we did it, Stephen. That's okay. So we now fit AI cameras on all of our articulated vehicles, and the main reason we do that is around driver fatigue and to support the driver. So we run a lot of vehicles overnight. So we do day runs, night runs with the same vehicles, and our night drivers are effectively our most at risk. They're out there on their own. There's a team of 11 of them out all night. They all talk to each other. But if something goes wrong or they are tired, there's less people to notice. So I think from a point of view of talking to drivers, we've got to sell the benefits. Sell the benefits of, we'll help you. If we see something, we'll be able to talk to you the following day. We'll be able to support you to be a better, safer driver. I think one of our listen again. I can repeat most of the things I've said again already around telematics, but one of our biggest issues with telematics was we get too much data all at once. So we've had to be really careful. We get the right data, the right reports at the right level. So a driver would need to see at what point did the system believe they were speeding or believe they did something harsh maneuver. And then a transport manager level, maybe more of a site-based. How's the site looking in terms of trend analysis? And then as you step up through the levels, you get effectively less granular data and more trend management. I think managing the trend allows you to manage a risk easier than manage each individual incident, because you could have an issue with the system where it picks up the wrong road speed. You could have an issue with one particular driver on the site, which alters the benchmark. However, trend management from that telematics data is where now we support our risk management policy with, because that effectively gives us the most broad speaking in terms of data, i.e. we know what the majority of the fleet's doing and where the majority of the fleet are trending. Once we see that trend start to come down, we then don't take our foot off the pedal as such. We carry on and we keep looking at that data and we keep reporting on it monthly, to the point that the driver then actually tells us what's going on rather than us tell them, because they're then bought in around they've got to beat the colleague's score, or they've got to beat their own score from last month, last week, yesterday. It becomes a bit of a challenge for them to beat their own score, which actually then means you need for reporting is less. But I think going back to the question originally, that all of that's got to be puts the driver in a positive light, and effectively, as Aaron said, an incident can actually help you sometimes in do that and put that positivity message to the driver.
Okay, I'm going to bring a couple of questions together around incentivization to improve driver behavior versus the big stick, as it were. When do you use incentivization, and how successful is it versus just getting a bit tough with the drivers? What's the kind of balance? What's the situations where you would use one or the other? Matt Hammond, can I come to you first?
I don't buy into gamification at all. I don't agree with it. I think it devalues the importance of road risk. Drivers are there. We have certain expectations that we set. We expect certain standards to be achieved. I don't get a reward for driving home and not crashing into somebody, so why should anybody else? These are the rules of the road. These are what people expected. These are the highway codes. These are what people are trained to do. You're a professional driver, whether you're driving a truck, a van, or a car. You all have a certain level of expectation. That doesn't matter if it's your private vehicle or a company vehicle. So why would I then reward you for not crashing? I don't understand that at all. I think for me, we set expectations, we train the drivers, we give them the correct tools, we give them the newest vehicles we can get, we give them the safest vehicles we can find. We take feedback from the drivers on certain vehicles. We put driver committees together so we can understand the pros and cons of different vehicle types when we're changing. We involve them, we get them buying into the process. What I'm not going to do then is give them a reward for not crashing them when I've done all the other things. So, yeah, I don't understand it. I don't think it's big stick. I think it's actually grown up thinking and it's saying this is what I expect and this is your reward. Is you can come in again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Mark, the sort of carrot stick incentivization.
Yeah, I mean, from a driver. HGV driver perspective, we do incentivize drivers for doing the right thing. I think that comes from a different world potentially to some of the fleets on this panel. That I agree with Matt. No one should get a bonus for doing what's expected of them, meeting the rules of the road. But we bonus and we incentivize based on exceeding the benchmark. So if we have a benchmark which is above or better than the rules of the road, or beats an MPG score or whatever, we would then incentivize the driver that doing the best out of the best, if that makes sense. So I agree with Matt's point of we shouldn't be incentivizing drivers to do the right thing legally, but what we do is we incentivize the driver to do better than better, or better than the law, or better than be the best of the best, and then there's rewards at the end for that driver to do that. I think just again following on from Matt's point that some of our drivers may think, well, in the world we live in, especially last year, our drivers need ADR. They're all qualified to carry dangerous goods. in the world of fuel driver shortage last year, the drivers are saying, well, I'll go and work there for an extra £1 an hour. It became a bit of a money game. We had to do something to say to a driver, look, if you provide us a saving, you provide us a safer fleet, and you drive and do the job better, we'll give you something back. Because for them, they were saying, well, what's in it for me? If you don't like the way I drive, you want to dismiss me, fine, I'll go and work for one of 70 other companies tomorrow, not a problem. So we had a bit of a recruitment concern where retention and recruitment were our issue last year, which really was market driven. Pleased to say we've actually got the opposite now. We've got a waiting list for drivers at some of our sites. So people now want to come and work for us. And that is, one, because of the safety culture of the business. We are known for being safe, very safe in our industry. We've got a new fleet of vehicles with new technology on, etc. So we look good to potential candidate for a role. And then incentivise them to be better than the best, then actually that does really help us and does really work. And there is a need for a big stick, Stephen. Of course there is. And when you start being ignored around certain things, then that's when the big stick comes in. But we do incentivise our commercial vehicle drivers to be better than the best.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, what's your take on this?
Yeah, very, very similar to Matt and Mark, to be fair. I mean, I don't agree that we should incentivise drivers to drive legally and safely. They should have that as part of their own self-belief anyway, that they should be able to drive. They've all passed the test of certain types. But we do incentivise. We have a driver of the month and a driver of the year scheme. But we don't include accidents in that in those metrics, because nobody should have an accident as far as I'm concerned. There's always somewhat a blame behind that. And why should we incentivize them to not speed or not harsh brake or anything like that? But as a business, we made that decision to go along those lines of having driver of the month and driver of the year. And it does work. It does create healthy competition. So it does have its benefits. Those guys then become buddy drivers and the lead drivers and stuff like that. So it does have its benefits, but I don't personally believe that we should be incentivizing them.
Matt Neal.
So, like the other guys, we don't incentivize them per se. The only incentivization we do is via our telematic system. So they will go, if they become an elite driver, they go into a reward system which is covered by the telematics provider. We don't, as a business, incentivize them to say, well done for driving the vehicle safe and keeping yourself alive, because I don't see why we should. Anybody that jumps into a vehicle should understand that they're driving risk just in exactly the same manner that if they're an electrician or something, they've had qualifications to carry out their role. They don't get incentivized for not blowing somebody up. If they're a gas engineer or something, it's their job to make sure that they do that safely. And like I mentioned before, they're drivers before they're anything else. So they need to be making sure that they're doing that safely just as much as they're doing their other job safely as well.
Mm-hmm. Ian, if I can come to you again with your customer hat on, and what sort of incentives do you see working well, and do you have a view on if and when the big stick should be used?
I think it's really interesting to listening to my colleagues here. I have maybe start with Matt at the start, Matt Hammond. In real life, I'm all in line with what Matt said. Doing something to keep somebody safe should be everybody's responsibility, and I do buy into the gamification can trivialize that as a very serious subject. I think I'd just spin it slightly, and clearly out there'll be lots of fleets that will have a different view or a different approach, and sometimes things might work for a particular narrative. I think I wouldn't miss the opportunity to recognise where people are performing really well, and I think as human beings we all want to hear that we're doing well. So I think if you were talking about reward financially, and we get paid a job, we get paid for a job, we get paid a salary, and Matt, I think Matt and both Aaron were very vocal on that's driving within the law should be a prerequisite, absolutely. But I feel like missing the opportunity to recognise that somebody is actually a top performer is an opportunity to recognise they could be a promoter, they could be the good example that everybody should aspire to. So rather than the reward and the gamification piece, it may be more a case of this is what good looks like, and this is what we expect as the behaviour and the narrative that we have as a responsible employer, and from a corporate and a social responsibility perspective too.
Okay, pretty much at the end, but there were a couple of questions that came in around grey fleet, and it was something I was going to ask about anyway. So how do you tackle safety on your grey fleet? Same as your any other part of the fleet, or do you have different policies in place, or no policies at all? Just a sort of a whistle stop tour. Matt, you've gone green. I'll come to you first, Matt Hammond.
Exactly the same. All drivers would treat the same. You know, you're driving on company business. It doesn't matter whether you're driving a car, a van, or a grey fleet. We have a duty of care in place, and yeah, it's a driver training that we put in, and that's it. Full stop. If you come up on the license check system, you go through it. We don't differentiate at all.
Aaron?
Yeah, exactly the same. So we check the license, we check the documents. We have a policy on the age of their vehicle that they can have. So, you know, you've got to treat them exactly the same as if you would if it was a company car driver. Exactly the same.
Okay, Mark.
Yes, same, Stephen. I mean, our EHS team manage our risk policy for cars and trucks, and the same. I mean, whatever risk policy we follow in our truck world, we try and push that down through our EHS team to our car world as well.
Great. And Matt Neal.
Yeah, the same as everybody else. There's still a potential corporate manslaughter at the end of it, so it needs to be treated with exactly the same importance as a normal company car or van driver.
I'm sure you'd agree, Ian. That's pleasing to hear. I'm not sure how common it is necessarily, but it's pleasing to hear from our panelists. Any sort of further thoughts from you?
Wholeheartedly agree. There should be no difference. In fact, I'd argue probably a bit more diligence, documentation audits, you know, making sure licenses, not just checks, licenses are valid, because the check can be done one day, something can happen the following day, making sure insurance is in place, MOT servicing, and clearly you don't want somebody driving around in a 15-year-old vehicle in a grey fleet opportunity, because that's a recipe for disaster. But completely agree with the rest of the panel.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, 3 o'clock's just gone past 3 o'clock, so we'll call an end to the webinar. We ended up with lots of questions. I'm not sure if that was down to Matt's prompting, but there was a huge number of questions that came in. Quite a few that got answered during the course of the webinar. Some of which got answered via the chat. We will pull them all together, and we will pull out any key themes. If there are any that weren't answered, I'll share them with the panelists and hopefully get some answers from them. And then we'll share those with everyone that was on the webinar today to make sure you all have your questions answered. For now, please join me in thanking my panelists for their fantastic thoughts and guidance. So Aaron Powell at Speedy, Matt Hammond at Ultrad, Matt Neal at Platform Housing, and Mark Woodworth at Univar Solutions. And special thanks to Ian Pearson at our partner for this webinar, Arval UK. Hope you all found this session useful. Thanks for adding those questions and thoughts throughout the webinar. Quick reminder, on Friday, it never stops for us. On Friday, we've got the Fleet News at 10. In fact, Matt Hammond will be on that one as well. And that'll be at 10 o'clock. We'll be looking at the budget statement, looking at proposed driver certificate of professional competence, the European Commission announcement to allow e-fuels after 2035, the impact of Chinese brands coming to the UK. We'll also look at fleet careers and professional development, and tyre policies and managing tyre damage. So a pretty packed agenda, as we tend to have for these sessions. That's it for today. As I say, hope you found this webinar on safety and compliance, sponsored by Arval of use. On behalf of my panel and myself, thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day.